everyone, this is part 3, and we are going to do the axial division, and we're going to talk mostly about the skull in this part. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the sphenoid, and the sphenoid is this middle structure found on the inside of the skull, and if you were to pull this out, you would take this portion right here, okay? When you take it out, it looks like this. It looks like this crazy like moth, butterfly, insect thing, okay? This is the sphenoid. If it's by itself, you just need to write sphenoid on your test, okay? There's 2 specific things I'm going to ask you, and I will ask those on the skull. So when you're looking at this, the sphenoid's this area right here. This part right here, it means its name is sella tertiaca of sphenoid, and it means seat or saddle. And this is where your pituitary gland sits, inside there. And your attic chiasma kind of sits right here, and those are both found in your brain, okay? Your pterygoid processes are these grooves right here, okay? See these grooves? These are your pterygoid processes of your sphenoid. And this helps anchor like muscles that allow you to chew. So these are needed for that, okay? And they they're spelled with a PT, so Ptergoid. And I think the sphenoid kind of looks like a pterodactyl, and that's how they spell pterodactyl, with the PT. So that's one way to remember it. But these are your pterygoid processes of your sphenoid, and then your sella tertiaca of your sphenoid, which is where your pituitary gland sits on your brain, is right there, okay? And then by itself, it's just the sphenoid, okay? The ethmoid, taken out of the skull, looks like a walnut, sort of. And this separates your nasal cavity from your brain, this bone. That is found right here. So if you were to cut out this little bump right here, if you were to take it and cut it out, you would take out this part right here, the top area of your nose, and you would get this bone, okay? So if I were to ask it on the test by itself, it's just the ethmoid, okay? And the certain things you need to know on the ethmoid will be in the skull. This thing right here is your crista galli of your ethmoid, and it lays in the cribriform plate. So I always say the crista galli is the baby, and it lays in the cribriform plate. Your olfactory bulbs, there will be one that lays right here and one that lays right here, and then the crista galli kind of divides them. So it's a little like I guess a crib for the olfactory bulbs to lay. On the inside of the nose, you've got this thing right here that goes all the way down. That's also part of your ethmoid. This is your perpendicular plate of your ethmoid. And then you've got these 2 things right here. These are your middle concha of your ethmoid. The perpendicular plate forms your nasal septum, and then your middle concha forms your nasal passages, helps form those. So you got your middle concha of your ethmoid, your perpendicular plate of the ethmoid, your crista galli of the ethmoid, which is the bump, and then the flat area around the crista galli is the cribriform plate of the ethmoid. Your inferior nasal concha are these little bumps right here, and those also help form your nasal passages, okay? And then this bottom part, your perpendicular plate's on the top, and it's perpendicular to the bridge of your nose. That's probably where it got its name. The bottom part right here is your vomer, and that's also part of your nasal septum. And you can feel that like in between on your septum. If you push on it, it doesn't feel very good. It's kind of a soft spot on our faces. So that's the vomer. Your lacrimal bones are these bones right here, and there's holes in there. Those are your lacrimal ducts. So those are your tear ducts, okay? And the bones around those are your lacrimal bones. Your malar or zygoma bone is your cheekbone. So it's this area right here, starting at the apples of your cheek, going all the way back. So it's 2 names, malar or zygoma bone. Your zygomatic arch is this arch part that separates from the rest of the skull. Okay. Your nasal bone is your nose. That makes sense, right? And then your maxilla bone is this area. It's kind of the very front of your face. So it's where your lips are, kind of right below the eyes. These little holes right here, now remember a foramen's a hole that goes all the way through the bone, are called your infraorbital foramen in your maxilla. So this is where there's a nerve, there's a artery and a vein that go through those holes. Okay? Your mandible is your jawbone. Your chin is your body of your mandible. And on these little holes right here on each side of your chin, these foramens, is your mental foramen of your mandible. So you have to think before you talk, or people will think you're mental. So that's one way to remember that. Then you've got these two hinges. You've got your condylar processes of your mandible, and these are the back, and there's a Y in condylar, and they're kind of Y-shaped. And then your coronoid processes of your mandible are your front ones, your front hinges. And then your ramus of your mandible is like the bottom part of your jaw, or the back part of your jaw, and that's your ramus. So your body's in the front, and here's your ramus. Condylar processes of mandible, coronoid processes of mandible, mental foramens of mandible. Your orbits are where your eyeballs go. So this is all your orbit. You've got these perfectly round holes in the very back that kind of go into your brain. And that's your optic foramen, okay? And that is where your optic nerves go through. And your optic nerve will set right above your sella turcica. And that's called your optic chiasma, okay? Then there's two gashes. This gash that goes upwards is your superior orbital fissure, and then the gash that goes downwards is your inferior orbital fissure. And that is where muscles go that attach around your eyeball to help move your eyes around. So superior orbital fissure is the top one, inferior orbital fissure is the bottom one. Your optic foramen is that little hole that goes all the way back. The frontal bone is your forehead. Let me get the thing on here. Okay, your frontal bone is your forehead. So if you were to take this, that's your frontal bone. Your glabella is your eyebrow ridge right in between your eyes, where your eyebrows are. So that's your glabella. Your parietal bones are the side of your skull. There's one on each side. Your occipital bone is the back of your skull, all the way here. So this is all your occipital. And on your occipital, this big hole right here, that is your foramen magnum of your occipital. That's where your spinal cord goes, and it kind of is where your head is attached to your rest of your body. So it's kind of an important hole. So that's your foramen magnum. And then these little rounded processes are your occipital condyles. And they kind of look like the condyles on your knees, but they're in your skull. Okay. And then your temporal bone is this area right here. And in your temporal bone, you've got your mastoid processes, which are behind your ears. And if you ever have a headache, you kind of rub those and it kind of makes it feel a little better. Those are your mastoid processes. You have these big spiky things. These are your styloid processes. And then this big hole right here, that is your external auditory meatus of your temporal, and that's where your ears go. So you've got your mastoid processes of your temporal, your styloid process of your temporal, and your external auditory meatus of your temporal. And then you also have some sutures. You've got your coronal suture, okay? You've got your sagittal suture that goes all the way down. You've got your lambdoidal suture, which it's kind of one of the first ones to fuse, so it's hard to see, but it goes around your temporal, separates your temporal from your parietal bones. And then you've got your occipital suture, which is right here. Okay. And you've got ear ossicles, which I'm using this little thing that's perfect. So your malleus is the biggest of the ear bone. It kind of looks like a mallet or a hammer. It's right here. Your incus is sort of triangular shaped, and your stapes looks like a stirrup, and they're very small. But you got your malleus, your incus, and your stapes are your three your ossicle bones.